After news broke yesterday about California Senator Dianne Feinstein's short hospitalization following a fall, Democrats in Washington continue to duck questions about the 90-year-old Democrat's future in the Senate. Journalist Glenn Greenwald put the party leadership on blast, tweeting, quote, "The only reason Feinstein, 90, is still in the Senate, despite barely knowing where she is, and her daughter having power of attorney over her life, is Pelosi fears Newsom will name Barbara Lee to replace her, making it harder for Adam Schiff to beat Lee."
Democratic strategist Chris Jackson broke down the political calculation going on within the party, tweeting, quote, "Yes, if she resigned, Newsom could appoint a successor, but Republican support would be needed to add her replacement to the Judiciary Committee, and I can guarantee that wouldn't happen. I'm sure she is staying in office for this very reason. She knows without her, the progress of judges comes to a halt."
Yeah, that does seem fair.
That is true, as far as we can tell.
Now, why there isn't more critique falling on Chuck Schumer for allowing her to keep her crucial committee assignments as long as he did, that's the real question. And
for running for re-election the last time she did anyway, she was
I mean, that's true, but even if you can't force her out, even if you can't force her from running again, strip her of her committee positions for the betterment of the party. There has been so much bad leadership, I gotta say, coming out of New York in particular. Remember, New York State was the weak link with respect to midterms last year.
Yes.
Could have had a much stronger showing, but because of this whole controversy around redrawing the district lines, not anticipating that you're going to basically shrink the number of credible good candidates that were all like fighting against each other in all of these New York districts. It was terrible news for a lot of progressives in the state, and yet the leadership of the Democratic Party in New York seems to suffer no consequences. Let a progressive have a little bit of a misstep, and we see it blared all over the news that's why the party is failing. But these blue dogs are literally potentially jeopardizing the entire judicial slate going forward. And there's crickets. Chuck Schumer's name isn't even in this conversation.
Yeah. New York is running the whole Democratic Party in Congress these days.
Yeah, right into the ground.
Now, help me understand the shifting alliances between the Pelosi's, Newsoms, and all these other people. So Pelosi wants to clear the way for Adam Schiff, but Gavin Newsom has pledged to appoint a black woman. So that's the genesis of the conflict, even though these people were all formerly allied and friendly. And they
way earlier, before there was an actual race afoot for Dianne Feinstein's seat, Gavin Newsom, now in retrospect prematurely, said that he would want a black woman to be in that spot. Now, Barbara Lee is obviously the person that people call to mind. She is someone who has had really brave and I think admirable votes and an admirable record to run on, including being the sole person who didn't vote to authorize military force. And outside of her being black, I think that's almost reductive when she is one of the few truly credible anti-war voices in Congress who really put her money where her mouth was when it was very difficult to do so after 9/11. However, because of the entanglement between these families, so there have basically been these four great California liberal families, the Browns, the Pelosi's, the Newsoms, and the Gettys. And their entanglements have gone back literally generations. I think we have a graphic where someone attempts to untangle the relationships between the
we were
four.
looking at this graphic to prepare for the segment, and I gave up.
It's so
we should
Byzantine.
just put it on screen.
Right, so you can see that Governor Pat Brown in the top left, and then you have Nancy Pelosi's father, John, in the middle, and Newsom's grandfather, and then J. Paul Getty on the right. And you can see that there's a business relationship between Nancy Pelosi's father, and Newsom's grandfather. Mm-hmm. You can see that Newsom's grandfather adopted one of the Getty's children, and the Gettys formally have adopted Gavin. And so the import of all of this is that it is difficult for people like Gavin and Nancy Pelosi, even though they're on opposite sides of a political agenda here and who gets to replace Dianne Feinstein, it's difficult for them to come out swinging at each other.
Informally adopt Gordon Getty. It's weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
It is weird. But these kinds of entanglements, these personal, professional, business, and political entanglements are part of why you're not seeing the all-out blows or snipes that you might expect if there was a kind of an open race for this seat. And I think that there's compounded on top of all of this, Gavin Newsom's frustration that I think that he feels like it is his turn. He seems to be waiting in the wings for something to potentially happen. If something rather does happen to Joe Biden, he's not able to be the nominee. He seems to be positioning himself for all of that. And I think probably doesn't want to pick a big fight with powerful leaders in the Democratic Party, like someone like Nancy Pelosi. Obviously, she's not still Speaker of the House, but still carries a lot of influence.
Very influential, running a shadow speaker or minority leader of the House at this point. Yeah, we'll have to see. It's hard to tell, but it looks like an epic showdown is being set up for this seat whenever Dianne Feinstein does indeed retire. Obviously, she's not going to be running for re-election. She said that she is done after this term. Yeah,
blessedly. Now, the gerontocracy, of course, doesn't stop with Dianne Feinstein. We all remember just recently the episode that Mitch McConnell had. I think we have a clip of that as well.
After finishing the NDA this week, has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Are you good, Mitch?
Okay, Mitch? Anything else you want to say, or should I just go back to your office? Do you want to say anything else to the press? Let's go back.
Go ahead, John.
I'll take it back. Let's go back to you.
Go ahead, John.
So McConnell will still be in office until 2026. That's when he would be up for re-election. There was a challenge to his leadership after the last election, behind closed doors. Some, I can't remember, it was a handful of Republicans did vote against confirming him as the minority leader. Obviously, Mitch McConnell is not beloved by the MAGA base at all. He's not particularly well liked by Donald Trump at all. So Donald Trump continuing to be on the scene and becoming the nominee will mean there's going to continue to be acrimony between these two camps. There are some of the kind of Trumpier, I'm not saying that as a negative, more closely aligned with Trump, more into his version of populism, your Josh Hawleys, your J.D. Vances, those kinds of people. I think Blake Masters was widely perceived as he would be joining that faction, but he did not win election. So the anti-McConnell faction has picked up some steam over time, but McConnell he commands the purse strings, the donations flow through him, so he has so much financial power to back his people. He's the person who makes you go away. No one is going to make him go away until he's ready to go.
Right. So if he were to become incapacitated, however, just like Dianne Feinstein, if we were in the position where we're asking whether these people are kind of fit and competent to lead, he's in a similar situation as Feinstein. As you pointed out, holding the purse strings, being on the Appropriations Committee, on the Rules Committee, Republicans are going to have to figure out what to do about that. Is there a world where we could have like an even Steven tit-for-tat trade where everyone puts down their weapons and allows
the old people to be retired?
Right. Or is the friction that you just pointed out between the Freedom Caucus and the rest of the Republican caucus going to put a wrinkle in that machination, a monkey wrench in that machination? The Democrats, this is something I've complained about a great deal as a leftist, but the left-leaning Democrats, the squad members and the like, showed complete and total solidarity with the establishment wing of their party during the Freedom Caucus force the vote moment earlier this year.
Democrats fall in line, right? You saw what Republicans were willing to do to Kevin McCarthy.
And they won a great deal of power from it. But does that frustrate Republican establishment leadership as they try to figure out what to do with the potentially incapacitated? Not that we are there yet with Mitch McConnell, but...
not to psychoanalyze him, but McConnell was probably thinking, along with a lot of other establishment figures in the Republican Party and even a lot of people in conservative media, that maybe we were almost done with Trump. He wasn't going to be the nominee again. There were promising alternatives. Now you're gearing up for, if you want to, it was reasonable that he might outlast him.
Sure.
now, when is Trump ever going away? I don't know. If I'm waiting for Trump to just be done and then I can really have command of my factions again and then retire in a happy place, I don't think that's gonna. He's got to stay in charge, the minority leader or the majority leader, depending on the composition of the Senate, for a long time if he wants to outlive Donald Trump's political career.
Indeed, indeed, especially since, per Donald Trump's representations of his doctor, he's one of the healthiest presidents to have ever done it.
He'll run again in 2028, maybe from prison, but he'll be running.
All right, we're rising for you right after this.